So you talk a lot about how, I think you called it the 70-20-10 principle of how we learn. So the vast majority of what we learn by actually doing. And I love the way that you detail that in the book. So for somebody who wants to become a better leader, especially if they're in a company that doesn't necessarily foster that, how do they get that practice? How do they do those reps?
Well, first of all, a lot of companies don't foster leadership. They don't have a leadership environment. They'll come and say, "I love your leadership principles, but I'm not a leader because I don't have the position." In fact, I wrote a book several years ago called The 360-Degree Leader, and I wrote it for that person that kind of is in the middle, how to influence or lead people above you, beside you, and kind of around you, that 360 idea, helping them understand that the key to leading people, even if you're not in a leadership environment, is again influence. So the question now comes down, then how do I influence people? And if I do influence people, how do I increase that influence? And my answer is very simple. We increase the influence with people when we intentionally add value to them on a consistent basis. Because if you think about people in your life that have a high influence on your life. They've really added a lot of value to you. And so what I share, I do a little simple formula that kind of works, and that is every day, again, consistency compounds. So you put consistency with intentionality, and you've got a powerful combination. So every day I basically do 5 things. Every day, first of all, I value people. It begins there. Because if I don't truly value people, I won't add value to them. You don't add value to people that you don't value. You don't add value to anything you don't value. So every day I value people. That's where it starts. But then every day I think of ways to add value to people. So I'll look at my calendar and I look at my agenda today and I realize I was going to be with you. And I think, well, okay, how can I add value to you? What can I do for impact theory that'll, just help? Because again, if you're constantly adding value to people, you're going to be of great value to people. So, okay, I value people, think of ways to add value to people, then I look for ways to add value to people. When I'm in the setting, I'm looking for, okay, what can I do? What can I say? But what we see is what we look for. And so if I'm looking to add value, guess what? I'll see ways to add value to it. Somebody else might be beside you, not add value at all to you. But I look for ways. And then number 4, I do things that add value to people. And then number 5, I encourage others to add value to people. And I've just lived that simple formula. I do that every day of my life. It's very simple. And I try to help other people do that, understanding that if they do that, wherever they are, leadership culture, not a leadership culture, doesn't really matter. They'll begin to influence and begin to lead people, and they'll begin to make a difference in people's lives. And I think that's essential. But I think you have to be intentional, and I think you have to be consistent. Consistency compounds. I'm 72. And I've been doing leadership for 50 years. And so when people say, well, how'd you become a leadership guru and all these things that you got? I tell them it's just consistency.
At the very beginning, he talked about the best motivation is self-motivation. And for me, if you take the Strengths Finder test, as I've grown as a leader, my top 5 have changed over the years, but number 1 has always been positivity. And so all from the time I was a young person, people would say, oh, Tracy, you're so motivating, you're so positive. And so as a young person, a budding leader, I don't know who needs to hear this today, but I know somebody does. I felt like that was my calling. That meant that what people were saying to me was that my role was to motivate people and to bring that positivity to people, which was true to some degree. But what I found myself doing a lot of the time was exactly what that quote said. And that was, I was motivating promoted people. I was motivating the wrong people. Yeah. And the quote from Tom Golisano was that you can demotivate people, but you know what also? You can demotivate yourself.
That's right.
When you are trying to motivate the wrong people, it is exhausting. So if you think of this as your little check mark. If you're wondering if you've been motivating the wrong people, if you find yourself exhausted, demotivated, a little down and discouraged, if you feel like you're ready to throw in the towel because maybe you aren't a motivated or positive person and you're starting to feel negative even, then odds are you have probably been trying to motivate the wrong people. Right. And so I'm just curious, Mark, did you ever need a thinking shift, or were you always a leader who motivated yourself, motivated the right people, or were you somebody who also, like me, brought your positivity? Because you're a very positive and motivated person. Just to be around you, I know people just walk away from you smiling and a little spring in their step. Were you always that way, or were you somebody who, like me, found yourself a little exhausted and demotivated from motivating the wrong people?
Yeah, so I wish I could say, yeah, I once had that problem, but the real truth is I still have that problem. And I'll tell you what I mean with that. You know, as John was teaching that, and even Tracy, as you were just talking about kind of your epiphany back in earlier in life, I thought about the question that John gets asked all the time. Hey, how do I motivate my people, right? Any leader out there want to lift their hand and say, yeah, that's me. I want to know, how do I motivate my people? Yeah, Tracy's got both hands up. I've got both hands up. I want to motivate somebody, please. And John says, here's the best way to motivate people. And everybody kind of grabs their pen and their paper. And if you're watching on YouTube today, I mean, I've got my paper ready. I'm ready to hear what John has to say. And he says, the best way to motivate people is hire motivated people. Yeah. And now it's so fun to kind of laugh and go, yeah, that's right. Well, what happens when we are the people? When the people that needs motivating is us, is you, I, the leader in the equation. And I think, Tracy, that's what you're asking me is, how do we lead ourselves? John says leaders motivate themselves, followers wait for others to motivate them. And I do want to be an inspirational person. In fact, my life purpose that I discovered at 33 was Mark Cole exists to motivate and inspire people to reach their full potential. And I know that to live out that purpose of inspiring or motivating others, it has to start with me. And yet, there are times that the last thing that I feel is motivated or inspired. And so I do think the idea of inspiring oneself is a muscle. It's something that we have to work at. We have to put into practice. What motivates you? What's your happy place? What's things that refuel you and replenish you? What is your ideal Sabbath or time of rest so that we're working from rest rather than resting from work? And I mean, I believe that's really important, but I also think, Tracy, that for us as leaders, we do have to realize that if we rely on external circumstances or external relationships or external factors to motivate ourselves, we are in for a very difficult road in the area of leadership. There has to be within us, much like what Tracy had, an epiphany that says, I am going to be my chief motivator. I can't rely on others. I can't rely on circumstances. I've got to find ways to inspire myself so that I will inspire others. And I think that's what John's saying here, Tracy. I think that's what your epiphany was. There has to be in each of us a realization, an accepting of responsibility that if we are going to be motivated, if we're going to inspire others, it is going to be up to us to motivate ourselves. And I think that's a big distinction between leaders and followers, as John noted in the lesson today.
I agree. And I don't want, if you didn't get this and write it down, I wrote it down as Mark said it, because I haven't heard you say this before, and it's powerful to me. We should be working from rest rather than resting from work. And I think so many of us limp into the weekend, whatever day that is. Maybe it's a Saturday, Sunday, or maybe it's a Monday, Tuesday, or whatever your work schedule is. But so many of us limp into the weekend rather than, and then try to gear back up again for the Monday of our work week, rather than every day waking up refreshed because we are rested. We are staying in a place of rest so that we are working from that rest. And that is, if you don't know what that is, if you don't know what that feeling is, then you're probably resting from work.
Yeah.
And it's a huge difference. So thank you for saying that, Mark. And I think that really does bring a motivation. And you and I were talking a little bit before this. One of the things that John says that is a distinguishing mark from him from other leaders, and that is that he talks about being a motivational teacher, not a motivational speaker.
Right.
Can you kind of differentiate that for people who maybe haven't heard him say that before?
Yeah, so just come to a John Maxwell event and you will leave inspired. In fact, we did a study in 2021 on why people make a decision to become a customer, a client, a partner of the John Maxwell organization. We were in the middle of our rebranding and we wanted to know the why. Why did people come? And so whether you talk to prospects, whether you talk to one-time customers, or whether you talk to multiple customers, over 80% of them said, we came for inspiration and skill development. We wanted a few tools that would make us better, and we wanted some inspiration. John is a motivational, inspirational, incredible teacher. But John says, hey, I don't want to be a motivational speaker, because a motivational speaker, you feel good, but 30 minutes later, you can't remember why. But a motivational teacher, you absolutely can feel good, but you know why, the skill set, the application piece.
Right.
But something that most people would not know about John in the area of creativity or in the area of leadership even. When we have things that we need to make decisions on, and I've brought him into those decisions, he doesn't come in like he does from stage and goes, we got this. Come on, guys. Everybody good. I'm more lean toward that, to try to passionately inspire people through challenges. John settles down, almost becomes melancholy in his demeanor as he works through it and allows that grind or that challenge to be felt in the room, and doesn't try to get people hyped over it. Again, I have to be careful with that, but not John. And so it's an interesting observation of John that when he's on stage, when he's got the teacher's lesson in hand, that he really challenges and inspires people through motivation. But yet when he gets into a leadership context, he very much settles his emotions down and begins to methodically work through that particular challenge. I every day try to learn from him. Every trip, just a weekend ago from the time we recorded this podcast, I was asking John, help me to distill below the emotion to the reality of the situation so that we can practically work through it. And I think we as leaders need to understand when we need to motivate and inspire people, and when we need to be accessible and steeped in reality of a difficult situation. I think John's given us a lesson on that with these 4 Ps.
Yeah, he sure does. I love how you said that. He brings his energy low and getting below the emotion, that he does not rely on the hype of energy. And as two energetic people, you and I can relate to that and really that is a lesson to be learned for people who are high energy people, to settle in, and so that you don't walk away, that the people in your hearing as a leader, that they don't walk away not knowing what to do.
That's right.
Feeling so good. And I can tell you, I have left where I know that my audience felt really good. And I know that they felt good. And I know that they felt probably that they liked me, but they didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I know that I've done that before. And so it's just another learning lesson. And so getting into those 4 Ps, I feel like these really, the 4 Ps that inspire effort. And I feel like he really, in perspective and perceptive, I feel like he really, was there anything that you wanted to touch on those, and persistence? I feel like he really did a good job teaching on those. Was there anything that you wanted to touch on those before we get to persuasion?
The only thing I would say on perspective, is often we put our perspective on other people and we think, wow, if this motivates us, it has to motivate everybody else in the room.
Right.
And that's not
Right.
true. When John's teaching this perspective, he asks the question, it's in your notes, how do others see things? And many times we as leaders, we fall prey to the trap of trying to motivate people the way we're motivated rather than motivating the people the way they are motivated. And so leaders, communicators, get into the shoes of the people that you're trying to influence and understand their motivators, their perspective, and that's true on perceptive too. And, the things that used to motivate me don't motivate me anymore. I've changed. I've matured. I want maybe less partying and a little bit more significance in my life. And a leader needs to understand the phases or the seasons of the people he or she is leading to be able to motivate. And that's what John's talking about with perceptives. But again, it goes back to the perceptive of the individual you're trying to lead or influence, not your perceptive. I've often thought, man, a new car has motivated me at different times in sales contests and different things. And somebody else goes, I could care less about that. As a leader, we need to understand the things that really grab their attention and use those in our inspiration.
And I think that works both professionally and personally. I mean, I'm talking to parents right now that when you're trying to motivate your kids and different kids, what motivates one kid is going to be totally different. So these can apply, these 4 Ps, inspiring effort. It's not just about teams in the marketplace. We're talking about in families too, because we are raising up leaders in our homes.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to inspire effort in our kids, it's about asking the questions and inspiring the thirst in the horse of our children that we really want to make sure that we do that as well. Okay, so let's jump to number 4 because I would like to park it a little bit there. And I know that you and I talked a little ahead of time that's really one. We hated for it to it was like a cliff. He walked us up to the cliff and we were like, oh, we wanted a little bit more.
Hey,
and so
he walked us up to the cliff and said, take it away, Mark and Tracy. You guys go for
that's
it.
Right.
And so that's what we're going to do.
That's right.
Tracy, it's funny you just mentioned that, make the kids thirsty. In the lesson, you heard John say that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And so then he says, a lot of people think you've got to inspire them to drink. And John says, no, you got to inspire them to be thirsty because when you're thirsty, you'll drink. And so I think that really links to the foundation I want to lay with persuasion. And one of the things that you and I, podcast viewers, podcast listeners, one of the things you and I can always go back to in our life is working for a disingenuous leader that really was motivating us for their interest. And if you were watching, you caught the air quotes. For those of you that were listening, I did air quotes around motivating right there. They're motivating us, but really they're manipulating us, right? I mean, it's this idea. Great leaders have to really walk a thin line between motivation and manipulation. And that's why when John began to teach this persuasion through sweetness, I think the sweetest thing to anyone's ear is what? You've heard it said before, their name. When somebody remembers their name. Well, I think in the art of motivation, the sweetest thing that a leader can do to motivate people is to persuade me to do what I want to do. That's sweet. That's as sweet as a name. That's sweet when a leader begins to know me enough and pull out of me the things that I am passionate about that I need to be pursuing. And I really want us as leaders to know the art between manipulation and motivation, or persuasion and trying to prescribe to somebody your opinion of what they want or what they should have. If we can learn how to inspire them to thirst. That's what I want you to write in your notes. Jared, sitting in the studio today gave me that concept. He said, Mark, I really think what John's talking about, when you lead people to work, to a horse to water, you're really trying to figure out how to inspire others to thirst after their best self, after their best version. And when people get hungry enough, it goes back to a quote I give all the time: when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I'm sitting here today going, how do I, in the art of motivation, how do I inspire people to a thirst, persuade them to a thirst that will allow them to lean in and let me help them? And it comes back to this one statement: do the work of knowing your people. Do the work. How can I better understand what causes my people to be thirsty? I love giving personal illustrations, and my personal illustration here is Miley, my Australian Shepherd. She is the perfect dog. Miley, when we travel, and my wife Stephanie and Macy traveled with me this past weekend, and we went out, and Miley just doesn't like to eat while we're gone, and she really doesn't like to eat when we get back. Doesn't drink a whole lot. She loses weight. It's visible. We can see it, and she won't eat her food. She just misses her mother. She does not miss me, because that would be a constant state of affairs. But she misses Stephanie. She misses Macy. And so we got back yesterday, and she still wasn't eating. So now she's about 3 days not drinking, not eating. So we took her on a run through the park. I mean, we ran, she chased squirrels. We cleaned the park out with all those terrible squirrels. When we came back, guess what Miley did? She went to get something to drink, and after about 15 minutes of cooling down, she cleaned her entire bowl. You know why? We made Miley thirsty. We knew what it would take. Chasing squirrels is the ticket for Miley. Well, find out what squirrels your team needs to chase. And when you can find that, then you can begin to persuade them to be thirsty for their best self. Tracy, I think that's the art here.
I agree. And he said, just as it's about relationship. And we can't miss that. It's what you're showing there is the relationship that he has with Stephanie and with Macy. And I would even say a little bit you. But I feel like what your dog was feeling like, what people, I mean, we're drawn to relationship. And John will say, if you don't love people, you'll manipulate them. That's right. And as a leader, that's a great gut check. But for those of us who also have had leaders, what is the questions that John says that we're all asking when we're working with a leader? Can I trust you? Do you care for me? And can you help me? Yeah. So when you are in a position where you're feeling like, am I being manipulated here? Some of those other three questions, because what did he say? Good leaders ask great questions. So ask yourself those questions. Is this person trying to help me? Can I trust this person? Because those are those kind of gut checks that you need to ask if you are feeling like you might be manipulated, or if you're the leader, if you're feeling like, am I being tempted to manipulate them? And he said, partnerships, which is relationships, the best partnerships, there is going to be a win-win. It shouldn't just be one-sided where just the leader is winning or just the person we're serving and leading is winning. The best partnerships, the best relationships where people are winning. And going through those 4 Ps where we are inspiring and motivating people is when we're going to see the win-win.
Well, and I go back. In fact, there's a relevant episode we're going to put in the show notes because it's really practical in helping you with motivation. We did 10 maxims for motivation. We did a series on that, and we're going to put that in the show notes because I want you to go back and really get some practical things. The biggest thing I can give you is know your people. Know who it is that you're attempting to persuade, to give perspective, perceptive, persistence to, and begin motivating them.
What are some of the keys to fostering the growth of leaders within your organization?
First of all, I think 90% of leaders never develop leaders. I think they just have followers. And one of the reasons is a lot of leaders don't really want other leaders. Leaders are hard to lead. I mean, it's like herding cats. They just don't naturally fall in line. So So I think that, first of all, most people don't really develop leaders. But in developing leaders, there are three things that are just absolutely essential. In the book, The Leader's Greatest Return, I wrote The Leader's Greatest Return because I truly believe that the greatest return a leader ever gets is developing other leaders, because that's when you really begin to compound. And I think there are three essentials always in developing leaders. First of all is your own example. People do what people see. So if I'm going to develop leaders, I have to be a good leader. Maybe the greatest leadership words ever said was follow me. Just follow me. Watch me. Because what Stanford research says that 89% of what we know visually. And so I think, first of all, in developing leaders, you have to model it. The second thing I think in developing leaders is you have to be intentional. I think that you have to commit yourself to finding them, which I talk about in the book, letting them come to the leadership table, discerning what kind of capacity they have. And then I think you have to intentionally have a program of development for them. I think you have to have a process. I think of all the money we spend in companies in marketing and in advertising. And I was speaking one time, this was several years ago, for AT&T. And when I was introduced to their maybe top 300 leaders, I was going to spend an afternoon with them. The guy said something very interesting. He said to them, you're our most appreciable asset. And of course, that's a wonderful statement there. Everybody loves that. And I came up behind him and I said, it's true and it's not true. I said, you're really only an appreciable asset if somebody intentionally develops you and you intentionally develop yourself. We don't automatically get better. And this is a big miss. I think that we think, well, if I just automatically go to work or if I automatically do my job, that I'll just grow. And I had a mentor when I was in my 20s just say, John, growth is not automatic. Getting older is automatic, but getting better isn't. And there's a world of difference. So I think that you have to be an example, and I think you have to be incredibly intentional in saying, okay, I'm going to have a leadership culture. I'm going to develop leaders. And the third thing I think that is just overlooked consistently in developing leaders is that you've got to empower them. You have got to let them run the ball. Because the only way you learn leadership is by practicing leadership. So I think what a good leader does is she sets the stage for a successful run. You want to get some wins under their belts for them. And I just think that it's an empowering environment where you release people. The problem is leaders will stop and say, well, but they don't do it as well as I do it. And so that's not the point. The only way they can ever do it as well as that you do it is for them to do it. And then for you to coach them and come alongside of them and say, okay, here's how you can do that better. And we have a kind of like a 5-step equipping process. I do it, you're with me, you do it, I'm with you, you do it, and then you do it and someone else is with you, and it's a multiplication process there. So I think those three things of the example, the intentionality, and the empowerment, that's I think what develops a leadership culture that really establishes the fact that if you want to learn how to lead, this is a place where you can do that. I say this in the book, by the way, that when I would bring people on the team, I would share with them that I wanted them to work themselves out of a job.
Yeah.
And pretty much I would just say, okay, you've got the job. I want you to do it well. Let me see you do it well. But while you're doing it well, you find somebody to replace you. And that's how that's really how you develop. You talk about a farm team of leaders. And if you can work yourself out of your job, I'll give you another job. Mark Cole, who he and I are owners of the company now, and he's the CEO and president, but he started off in the stockroom 20 years ago.
Whoa.
20 years ago. And I was just asking him recently in a conversation, I said, how many jobs did you work your way out of to get where you are? He said 9.
Wow.
9 times. And I tell people, first of all, I can't promote you unless you got somebody to replace you. Mm-hmm. So the first part of promotion isn't just getting better till I want to bring you up. First part of promotion is to show me some person that we're not going to have a big loss if I do bring you up. And 9 times he worked himself out of a job, found somebody else, and said, "Okay, come on up," until one day he's where he is.
Not bad. That's very impressive.
You said leaders must be close enough to relate to others, but far enough ahead to motivate them. And so I want to ask you about both sides of that coin. On the close enough to relate, can you first of all describe that? And then I want to try to get into your mind and ask honestly, like, is there such thing as too close? Can you share too much?
Yes. That's a great question. When you talk about leading by example and being in front of them, but being close enough to relate to them, I always tell leaders, close comes first. Close comes first. I want friends. I don't want fans. And if I want friends, then I have to walk with them. And I want to walk with them. And so until I can make a connection with you, and until you can know that my connection is sincere, I will impress you, but I won't impact you. We impact people close up. We impress people far away. And so I always tell leaders, start with close. And the reason you start with close is because young leaders aren't good enough to be far ahead yet. In fact, when I was a young leader, I wasn't ahead of anybody. Everybody was ahead of me. I was 22 years of age when I had my first leadership responsibility, and everybody in my group, they were already ahead of me. So I never knew what it was. It took me a long time before I knew what it was like to be out front. But it didn't take a long time for me to connect with the people and know that I really cared. And so my leadership in the beginning was really a caring connection more than a competence connection. Now, obviously, if you don't develop that competence and get far out in front of them, then after a while, they're going to say, I have a great friend, but I don't have a leader.
Right.
And I have a lot of wonderful friends. I'm just not going to follow them. But I mean, they're just terrific friends. So I think the caring comes first because that's the heart. And, people touch your heart before they ask for a hand. So I think that comes first. And then, obviously, you've got to grow into your leadership. But if the people care for you and you care for them, they'll give you space. They'll give you time. They'll let you mess up. They're your ally. Again, I tell leaders all the time, the greatest thing you could have is have the people that you love you, and always be there to help you.
Imagine this. So imagine I'm a young leader, or I'm starting my leadership, and I care about people. And I've got a team of 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and they know I care. And then I see more and I see before, and so I get out ahead of them, and we cast vision, and we grow together something special. Now I've got 70 people. And then one day 700. How do you communicate care to those people when there's too many? You may not even know all their names.
Yes. Well, first of all, Andy Stanley, our friend, says, do for one what you wish you could do for many.
Right.
And I think that's a terrific principle in itself. But what I have always felt is this. I think unconditional love can be for everyone. But I don't think you can give everyone equal time. And so I share with my people, you don't have to earn my love. I give that to you unconditionally. But you do have to earn my time. And so there is where I began to distinguish the people that I want to develop and that I want them to move further, is by saying, the way that I will give you that time is for you to show me that you are paying the price for it, that you're up for it. It's John Wooden who would tell his ball players, don't tell me what you're going to do, show me what you're going to do. And so the moment I start going out in front, it's basically who's going to show me they want to be out front with me. And if you come out front with me, then you're going to have a little bit more of my time. And so I think caring for people is for everyone, but I think as far as leading and developing people, that's for someone. I think not everyone wants that kind of development, and not everyone works for that kind of development. So I think you have to be real clear. It's kind of like upfront expectations. I think that's what's important in leadership is that when somebody comes to get in the game, before you put them in the game, you say, let's have just a good, honest conversation. For example, Mark Cole, who runs all of our companies, one of the things I sat down with him years ago, and I said, there are a few things I want you to tell every person that joins our company. And one of those things, Craig, is we will have tough conversations. And I love telling them that when we hire them. Because when you hire them, they say, oh, whoopee, I got a job. Yay, we're in. And it's kind of like a high water mark for them. And I love that. At that moment, I like to also say, while you're feeling good and while there's been no problems, there will be problems. And I just want you to understand right now, so that when we have that tough conversation, you'll say, well, he isn't picking on me, or am I? No, no, no. This is the way this works here. And I just think that the upfront conversations is my willingness to be close to you.
Right.
But it's also my ability to share with you that there is a leadership part of my life that is always going to cause me to confront, to push, to pull, to prod. You know, in fact, I tell people all the time, the good ones, I say, I care enough for you to confront you.
Yes.
And I think we sometimes get a little Disneylandish on confrontation. It's like, he doesn't like me. No. In fact, he likes you so much, or she likes you so much, they're confronting you.
No, I like that so much too, because especially, you're the leader of your organization. And if someone is close enough and cares about you enough, you make a mistake, the fact that they come and tell you is a gift. It is a gift. And you have to work really hard to help people confront up. And also some people are afraid to correct their team members. And so I think, like you said, if clarity is kind, if you can say, hey, when I'm coaching you, it's because I believe in you. If I didn't believe in you or I didn't like you, I wouldn't be coaching you. So this is actually an act of caring by saying, hey, you can do this better, or have you thought of it this way?
Sure.
And that's another way of caring. I feel cared for by someone else when they do correct me and help me become better.
And I love you bringing that point out. And here's why, Craig. I think if I am not open for correction in my own life, then it's a very difficult thing for me to turn around and do it to others. Right. I think teachability starts at the top. And when I walk into a room, into any meeting as a founder, leader, it doesn't really matter. I can tell my team, and they know right off, the best idea when we walk out of here is the one that's going to win. Not my idea, the best idea. And I think creating that kind of an environment is very healthy. Let's call this teaching, since I've never given it before, let's call this teaching the Rule of 5 for leading. The Rule of 5 for leading. And in a moment, I'm going to explain to you how the Rule of 5 works, which is in itself tremendously life-changing. But what I'm going to do today is I sat down, I was up in San Francisco doing some writing for the last 2 days on another book. And I sat down and I wrote this out. I wrote this out, and I want to give this to you. So I want you to look at the person receiving side and say, John's never done this before, okay? He says, it's never done this before, okay? And tell that your neighbor, and he's doing it for us because we're special, okay? We're special, okay? Okay. Because again, if I'm going to have a relationship with this organization, your leaders and you, I want to come fresh. I want to come with teaching that really is where you're living and where you're going. And I know that you are the leaders of this organization. That as you go, the organization, the company goes. I know that. So let me. I'm going to talk to you. Let me talk to you a little bit about leadership. I wrote a book about 13 years ago, called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. Okay. How many of you have that book? Would you raise your hand? Okay, good. Yeah. In fact, let me do it one more time, and this time raise both hands so it'll look like twice as many. That's the best-selling leadership book ever written. It's sold millions of copies. It's sold over 1 million copies in China alone, where I go twice a year to teach and lecture. And the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, if you don't have it, you want to get it. Because that's absolutely the foundation for understanding leadership and how to lead and what you need to know to be a better leader. And for the teaching today, I'm going to take the first law, the law of the lid, L-I-D, and I'm going to teach the law of the lid for not long, 3 to 5 minutes. And then I'm going to teach the Rule of 5, and then I'm going to share with you 5 things that you need to do in the Rule of 5 to lift your leadership lid to get and be a better leader. So let me just teach you the law of the lid. The law of the lid just simply says that your ability to lead will determine how well you succeed. In other words, the better you lead, the more you'll succeed. The better leader you are, the larger organization you can develop. The better leader you are, the larger your following, the greater your influence will be. The law of the lid is an amazing law, and it basically says that as you learn to lead, you will grow and be more successful. And the better that you lead, the more successful you will become. Now, for teaching purposes on the law of the lid, I want you to look up at me and let me just give you a visual so that we can kind of make sure we got this, okay? If let's say, for example, if this is my leadership lid, this is how well John Maxwell leads, okay? This is my lid. I don't go any higher than this lid. This is my leadership lid. This is how well I lead. And let's just say I'm an average leader, so it's a 5. I'm a 5. From a 1 to a 10, I'm a 5 leader. If that's the case, if this is my leadership lid, this is how well I lead, what the law of the lid teaches is that my business, your business, what you do with Vasalis right now, your business will come under your leadership lid, but it will never get any better or go any higher or grow any farther than what your ability to lead is. So that your leadership lid literally determines the level of your success. So if I'm a 4 as a leader, what that means is that my business will be a 4. Or if I'm a 5 as a leader, my business will be a 4. Does that make sense? Now, even in a great organization like this, my leadership lid will determine the level of my success. Now, when I began to understand the leadership lid, and I began to teach the leadership lid, all of a sudden everything began to change. Because you see, it was in 1974 that I came to the conclusion, after studying successful people for 5 years, from 69 to 74, after really looking and watching successful people, I came to the conclusion that everything rises and falls on leadership. And when I say everything rises and falls on leadership, you say, John, what do you mean everything rises and falls on leadership? What I mean is everything rises and falls on leadership. Now, what part of that don't you get? I didn't say some things. I didn't say most things. I didn't say 99% of the things. I said everything rises and falls on leadership. In fact, I know it. I believed it in 1974. I started studying leadership. I started teaching leadership. I started leading a long time ago. But now in 2013, I'm more convinced than ever that everything rises and falls on leadership. And one of the reasons I am is because I've developed the largest leadership training company in the world. We're in 174 countries. We've trained 6 million leaders. In fact, we are now training 1 million leaders every 10 months. And we're 2 years away from training 1 million leaders every 6 months. And by 2020, we'll train 1 million new leaders every month around the world. And so when the United Nations asked me to do the opening assembly to all the ambassadors, they said, come in and talk about leadership. The reason they asked me to do that is because we teach leadership, and in 2 years we'll be in every country of the world teaching leadership. And I understand leadership. I know how to train leaders. I know how to teach leaders. I understand leadership. It's been my life. It's been my life for a long, long time. And in 74, I was convinced everything rises and falls on leadership. And can I tell you, 2013, I know, without any question, everything rises and falls on leadership. So, how well I lead will determine how well I succeed. So, this is huge. I've got to become a better leader. And the question people ask me all the time is, can I become a better leader? They'll ask me a question like, John, are leaders born? When they ask me, are leaders born, I always give them the same answer. Of course they are. Come on now, think of that question for a moment, huh? I've never met an unborn leader. Huh? Hey, don't particularly want to either, thank you very much. So when they ask me, are leaders born? I know what they're not really asking, are they born? What they're really asking is, are there some people when they're born, they got it? And some people when they're born, they don't got it. And if you got it, you go to the front of the line. If you don't got it, you go to the back of the line. That's what they're asking. And I've got great news for you, and I do believe, I have no question about it, that there are some people that are born with what I call leadership leanings. No doubt about that, just like some people are born with kind of a musical leaning. No doubt. But the great news is, because I've done this for so long, and I've done this with so many over such a long period of time in every country of the world, what I know is you can learn to lead. You can learn to lead. You can learn to be a better leader than you are right now. You can grow as a leader. In fact, look at the person you're sitting beside and say to them, even you can learn to lead. Wow. Isn't that amazing? You weren't sure about that person, were you, huh? You weren't sure they could really learn, but now you got to. They can learn to lead. Now let's go back to this law. If I'm a 5 as a leader, that means my organization will be what? Talk to me. A 4. Okay, here we go. Because the leadership lid, won't allow it to go higher. So, how do I grow my organization? This is very simple, folks. I've got to raise my lid, don't I? I've got to get this lid up, and because I can become a better leader, I can raise my lid, true? So I can go from a 5 to a 6, to a 7, to an 8, to a 9. Now, this organization is a 4. When that leadership lid starts going up, that organization goes from a 4 to a 5, to a 6, to a 7, to an 8. You see, your organization will grow to the size of your leadership ability. Now, if I were where you are and I was listening to what I just said, and I was taking notes, somewhere on my notes or somewhere on my iPad, I'd be putting a star right here. I'd be putting a rocket ship. I would be putting a sign that says, "Do not miss this." Because your ability to lead will determine how successful you'll be in Visalis, without any question. The best leaders will build the biggest business. No question. That should light a fire within you. That should spark, something should be going off on the inside right now. You see, everything rises and falls on leadership, and I've got to raise my leadership lid, and Maxwell says I can learn how to lead, and the better I learn how to lead, the bigger I can build this business. There ought to be something inside of you that says something like this: I had better learn to lead. Hello, this is an IQ test. If you miss this one, you can go home now. Visalis can't help you. God can't help you. You understand? The whole concept, the whole idea that you can learn to lead, and if you learn to lead, and the better you learn to lead, the more successful you can become, and the greater your business. This is an absolute fact. It's not a theory, it's not a thought, it's not an idea, it's not a principle, it's a fact. And the law of the lid says, the better you learn to lead, the higher you lift that lid, the greater your business can become. Now, that's the law of the lid. So the question that I have today, and as I was talking on the phone to your leaders the other day, the question I have is then, well, how do I lift that lid? How do I lift that lid? If that's the key, then John, come on, let's get that lid lifted. And by the way, you're in luck because I know how to do that. Yeah, I really do. I ain't bragging, just living it, okay? I know how to do that. In fact, look at your neighbor and say, John can help us. Go ahead and tell you. John can help us. And look at your neighbor and say, and you need John to help you. Okay. All right, okay. Now. John can help you. Trust me on this. I know how to lift the lid. Now, to help you lift the lid, let me teach you the rule of 5. Now, the rule of 5 I can teach for 2 hours. So understand, I'm going to try to do this in 3 minutes. But I can with you because you're smarter than these other organizations. You understand? Okay, all right. With some, it's a week conference. Okay. So, with some, a week doesn't matter. Still doesn't take. Okay. The rule of 5 is the most life-changing concept for focusing on success that I have ever taught, that I've ever lived. So I'm just going to drop it on you just enough to help you understand the 5 concept, to help you understand the 5 things you need to do to lift your leadership lid. The rule of 5 just simply says, if you have a tree in your backyard that you want to cut down, and you have an axe, if every day you pick up that axe and you go to that tree and you swing 5 times with that axe to hit that tree, put the axe down. The next day you go out, pick up the axe, swing 5 times at the tree, put the axe down. The next day you go out, pick up the axe, and 5 more times you swing at that tree. 5 times. Every day you pick up the axe, and only 5, not 50, not 15, not 500. 5. If you swing 5 times a day at that tree with that axe every day, let me ask you a question. What eventually is going to happen to that tree? That tree is going to fall. Now, there's no question about that, is there? There's any doubt. You don't have to sit around the table and kind of say, do you think it will? Let's hold hands and sing Kumbaya and hope. If you swing 5 times a day at that tree every day, that tree will fall. End of story. Now, if it's a big tree, it may take a couple years. If it's a little tree in your backyard, I don't know, maybe in a month you could knock that baby down. I don't see. Now, the size of the tree will determine how long it takes for it to fall. But that's not what we're debating here. What we're teaching here is if you swing 5 times a day at that tree, every day the tree will fall. Now, that's the rule of 5. The rule of 5 says, find your tree. What's your goal in life? What's your purpose? What do you want to accomplish? What do you want to knock down? Where's your axe? What are your tools? What is it that you're going to use to effectively go after that goal 5 times a day? What are you? What is it? Because whatever that is, if you use it 5 times a day, every day, you'll be highly successful. For example, I write books. So let me just put that in writing for a moment. I've written 73 books. Jason, that was a nice introduction. It's 22 million, not 19. But what's 2 or 3 million? Give a little, take a little here, a little there. People say, John, how have you written 73 books? Oh, thank you for asking. The rule of 5. You see, there are 5 things I do every day that allows me to write that many books. It's not magic. It's not that I'm brilliant. It's just that I know the rule of 5. The rule of 5. You see, every day I read. Every day I file. Every day I think. Every day I ask questions, and every day I write. Every day I do those 5 things every day. Every day I read, every day I file, every day I think, every day I ask questions, every day I write, every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions, every day I write, every day I think, every day I read, every day I ask questions, every day I file, every day I write, every day I write, every day I read, every day I think, every day I file, every day I ask questions. Yes, I can do it in different orders, but every day. Doesn't matter whether you swing the axe left-handed or right-handed, you just got to hit the tree. Every day I read. File, think, ask questions, write, read, think, file, ask questions, write, read, think, file, ask questions, write. You say, now, John, what do you mean by every day? This is where it gets a little long sometimes. What I mean by every day is every day. Now, you say, now, when you say every day, do you mean, do you do that on Sunday? Every Sunday I read, think, file, ask questions, write. Do you do that on your birthday? Every birthday. Guess what? Every birthday I read, think, file, ask questions, write. Do you do that on Christmas? Guess what I do every Christmas? Every Christmas I read, think, file, ask questions, write. Do you do this when you're not feeling well? Can I tell you when I'm not feeling well? Even I'm not feeling well. Guess what I do every day? Every day I feel, when I'm not feeling well, I think, write, ask questions. Do all those things. Every day. You say, every day? At the age of 17, I started filing. I've never missed a day. I don't have 100 quotes. I don't have 1,000 quotes. I have tens of thousands of quotes. I don't have 100 stories. I don't have 1,000 stories. I have 10,000 stories. Where did you get all those stories? Where did you get all those quotes? Well, let me tell you something. Guess what I do every day? See, we overestimate what we can do in a day, and we underestimate what we can do in several days. And you got to understand, the secret of success is not the fact that, hey, I didn't say, hey, some days I get up and I write for 12 hours. And no. I didn't say I write all day. I didn't say I read all day. I didn't say I think all day. I didn't say I ask questions all day. I just said every day. Every day. You see, doing a little bit every day is a lot more important than doing a lot someday. And most people live in someday. Well, I'll tell you what, I think I'll get to that. You know what? I think I'll try that. You know what? I believe I got. Now, here's the key. You got to figure out what the 5 are. It took me 7 years to find my 5 for writing. You say, man, John, you're slow. I am. It won't take you 7 years. But it'll take you a long period of time. I could get the first 2 quickly, but the 3rd, the 4th, the 5th, it took me 4 years to get the last one. Now, forget writing, because this isn't about writing a book. This is about leading. And what I'm going to do is I sat up in my hotel in San Francisco, and I wrote out what I think is the rule of 5 for leading. And I'm going to give it to you. And I've never given it to anybody else. You're the first ones to get it. So look at your neighbor and say, we're the first ones. Go ahead and tell him. We're the first ones. We're the first ones. Okay. You got it? We're the first ones. Okay. Hey, and since you're the first ones, don't blow it. You understand? Okay, I'm going to give you, if you can do these 5 things, the rule of 5 for leading, you will lift your leadership lid. How many of you want to lift your leadership lid? Okay. These 5 things, I'm going to give them to you. And by the way, they're all simple. They're all simple. You can do all 5. You can do all 5. They're simple. Think about my rules for writing. Every day I read. You can read, can't you? Every day I think. Every day I file. No. See, the things that will bring you success are not complicated. They're simple. I'm a communicator, not an educator. Now, I have an education. I got 3 degrees, but I'm not an educator. An educator takes something simple and makes it complicated. Yeah, my father was a university president for 17 years. I know university stuff really well. An educator, they just take something simple and make it complicated. If you're not confused, they're not happy. A communicator takes something complicated and makes it simple. I'm a communicator. My name's John. I'm your friend. I'm a communicator. And I know how to communicate. I know how to put the cookies on the lower shelf. Yeah, sure. Might as well have some. I've been having some. I know how to put the cookies on the, and what I'm going to share with you about leading, you can do this, but you can't do this in a day, and you can't do this in a week, and you can't even do this in a month. You can't do this in a year. This is a lifetime of living this rule of 5. Are you with me? Yes. It's a lifetime. So there's no quick fixes here. There's no magic. But you can do this. Okay. Let me give you the first one. The first of the rule of 5 for lifting your leadership lid is lead yourself. Lead yourself. Now you say, John, when you say lead myself, what do you mean? What I mean is lead yourself. You see, when we think of leadership, we always think of someone else, don't we? We think, okay, I'm going to rule, that's rule of 5 for leading, lifting my leadership lid. All right, I got to go find some people. Got to find some people. Okay. Find some people. No. Before you lead someone else, you need to lead yourself. I was at a leadership conference, been speaking all day, doing Q&A the last session. A kid with an MBA stood up. He said, John, I love your leadership principles. My goodness. He said, I'm sitting here all day. He said, I'm an MBA student. I'm still in school. I don't even graduate till this spring. And he said, I kept listening to you and I kept thinking, boy, I wish I had somebody to lead. I wish I had somebody to lead. I wish I had somebody to lead. I wish I had a company. I wish I had a department. I wish I had somebody to lead. He said, I don't have anybody to lead. He said, where should I start? He said, good question. Start with you. Let me put it this way. If you wouldn't follow yourself, why should anyone else follow you? So what do I mean? I'm talking about leading by example. I'm talking about having the leadership qualities within you that you want to teach someone else. Having the leadership values within you that you want to impart to someone else. I'm talking about visually leading people. Because leadership is visual. It's a visual responsibility and it's a visual act. Nobody has ever said to you, I am following a great leader, I just have never found him or known him. No, you're taking drugs. Every person that you've ever followed, you saw. Every person that you ever said, I want to follow, that person has had an influence on you. And listen to me very carefully, because the most important motivational principle in leadership life is this: people do what people see. So when they follow you as a leader, it's not what you say to them that makes you effective, it's what they see in you. Let's go to the 21 laws of leadership for just a moment. The 21 laws of leadership. The law of magnetism. The law of magnetism simply says, we attract who we are, not who we want. Oh my. That is so good. No wonder that book has done so well. It'll change your life. We attract who we are, not who we want. I run into people all the time, and they come to me and they say, John, I'm developing a group. I'm starting an organization here, and I'm getting people to buy in. And John, I'm all excited, and I look up and say, what kind of people do you want to be attracted to your organization? What kind of people do you want to bring in? What kind of people do you want to recruit? And they'll say, you know what, I want people with energy. Oh, I want energy. I like energy is important. I want people with energy. And I'll tell you what else I want. I want people with a character. I want somebody who has some integrity and an attitude. Oh, I want somebody who has a good attitude. You know, oh, okay. And they start listing all these qualities they look for. And I'll let them list 3, 4, 5. It doesn't matter. But when they get to 5, I stop. I say, wait a minute. Hold it. Okay, you want somebody with energy? Yeah. You want somebody with character? Yeah. Well, I want somebody with good attitude. Yeah. That's what I want. That's what I want. Stop. I don't care what you want. I got a question to ask you. Do you have energy? Do you have character? Do you have a great attitude? You see, if you have energy, a character, and a great attitude, guess what you attract? Birds of a feather. See, like begets, like attracts like. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Before you ask somebody to follow you, make sure you have your own act together. You see, too many leaders, they're like travel agents. They send people where they've never been themselves. My name's John. And I'm your friend. Yeah, they're travel agents. They've never been there themselves, but they're always sending other people there. They've never experienced it. They've never lived it. They've never fleshed it out. They're not living it. They get up and they think, I'll just cast a vision. Boy, I'll just say, all right, here's the great way. People don't want to follow your finger. They want to follow you. Quit pointing. Quit talking. Talk's cheap. Any person that hasn't succeeded can talk. We teach what we know, but we reproduce what we are. Oh yeah, it's brilliant. When you've done this for 40 plus years, it's brilliant. It's not that I'm brilliant, it's just that I've done it so long. After a while, I catch on. We teach what we know, but we reproduce what we are. So if you're wanting to raise up some great leaders in your group, guess what? The first thing you need to do is be a great leader. Let me explain that to you. Let me just sit down for just a moment. At my age, it's a highlight. Let me just sit down for a moment and let's go back to the law of the lid. Remember when your lid was a 5, what was your company going to be? It was going to be a 4. Absolutely. The lid says you can't have a 6, you can't have a 7, you can't have an 8, you can't have a 9. You're a 5 leader. A 5 leader doesn't have 7s. A 5 leader doesn't have 8 companies. 5 leader doesn't have 9. 5 leaders have 4 companies. What kind of a person will you attract? If you're a 5 leader, you don't attract 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s. Can I tell you something? 8s don't want to follow 5s. 8s go meet a 5 and they say, whoops, Mr. Magoo. So how do you attract better people? Lift your lid. If you're a 5, you get 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s. If you're a 6, you get 5, 4s, 3s, 2s. If you're a 7, you get 6. If you're an 8, you got this? Stanford research says, just came from there. Stanford research says that 85% of everything you know, you learn visually. 85%. The reason I say that the first rule of 5 in leadership is leading yourself is because visual example is the most powerful leadership tool. Axe to cut down your tree. Trust me with that. James Allen said, people are anxious to improve their circumstances, but they're not anxious to improve themselves. And they therefore remain bound. The first person that you should teach leadership values to is you. The first person that should flesh out leadership is you. The first person that makes the decision to go forward is you. Lead yourself. I will promise you, start there. Start small. Start with you. When I was 25, I made a very important leadership decision that literally has changed my life. When I was 25, I made a decision that as a teacher, I would never teach something that I didn't 100% believe. And what that meant was I did a lot of things, I had a lot of subjects I didn't teach on. Are you with me? But I realized that the power, the life change, the passion all comes out of living it yourself. And once you start living it yourself, it is so amazing how people will begin to follow you. So don't leave this conference and go back and say, oh, let me tell you what I learned. No, don't tell them what you learned. Show them what you learned. My mentor for many, many years, John Wooden, used to say to me, John, I would look at my players at UCLA and I would say to my players, don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me what you're going to do. Number 1 on the rule of 5 for lifting your leadership lid is lead yourself. You got that one, don't you, huh? I can tell you got it. You are the smartest crowd I've talked to today. You ready for the second rule of 5? And by the way, every day, what do you do? Every day I what? Lead myself. You got it. Every day I lead myself. Number 2, the second of the 5 is every day add value to people. Every day. Every day add value to people. When I was 27 in Dayton, Ohio, I listened to Zig Ziglar, my wonderful friend who passed away about a month ago. What a precious... When you talk about somebody living his message, Zig lived his message. I knew him well, played golf with him, been on trips with him. We've spent a lot of time together. What he said is what he lived. What a great, great man. And I remember Zig in that wonderful Mississippi drawl as he'd walked around the stage in Dayton, Ohio, and he said what you have heard too, if you'll help other people get what they want, they'll help you get what you want. And that day my life was changed because as a young leader, I wasn't helping people get what they want. I was asking people to help me get what I wanted. I was saying, hey, listen to my vision. Look, here's where I'm going. Hey, look at my train. Hey, get on my train. Hey, let's go on my trip. Let's go on my journey. Hey, let me tell you. And I was trying to get people to come my way. And that day, everything changed when he basically said to me, John, leaders focus on others first. They focus on what is your dreams and what would you like to accomplish and what do you love? What's your passion? It changed my life. And from that time on, I said, okay, I'm going to be a person that every day adds value. And can I tell you, I have a practice I've done for 35, 40 years. I did it this morning. Woke up in my hotel. And I thought of you, and I thought that I'm going to be able to teach you today, and I'm going to be able to spend some time with you. And I began to think about how can I add value to you. And I took my notes that I had written yesterday, and I went through them again, and I looked at them. I said, okay, where can I help them? What can I do that'll really lift them? How can I add value? See, every morning I ask myself, who can I add value to, and how can I add value to them? Every morning. And every evening I ask myself, did I add value to that person, and how did I do it? Every morning, who can I add value to and how can I do it? Every night, did I add value to that person and how did I do it? Every morning, who can I add value to and how can I do it? Every night, who did I add value to and how did I do it? It's amazing because I teach leadership is influence, and people come to me all the time. They say, okay, John, how do I increase my influence? Because the more people that you influence, the more people you're going to have in your business. No doubt about it. It's very simple. People that know how to add value to people continually increase value and influence with people. So because I'm so passionate about adding value to people on a daily basis, remember, every day, every day I lead myself. Every day I add value to people. Every day I take that axe, lead myself, add value to people. Because I'm so passionate about it. I sat down a few years ago and I asked myself, okay, how do I add value to people? And I came up with 3 things that I want to pass on to you quickly. I add value to people, number 1, when I value people. You got to value people, friend. You got to really love people. Don't be like Charlie Brown one time who said, you know, I love mankind. It's people I can't stand. You got to value people. You see, if I don't value you, I'll take advantage of you. Leaders who get in trouble because they stopped valuing the people that they lead. So I've got to value people. Number 2, I have to know and relate to what you value. I have to know and relate to what you value, and I can only do that by listening. I can only do that by instead of talking and casting vision, turning to you and finding out where you are and how you feel, listening. Oh my goodness, the great leaders, they listen, they learn, and then they lead. They listen, they learn, and 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 If I want to add value to you, I have to value you. I have to know and relate to what you value. And number three, I have to make myself more valuable. If I'm really going to add value to you, guess what I have to do? I have to keep getting better, don't I? Because if I don't keep growing and if I don't keep getting better, it's impossible for you to keep growing and it's impossible for you to get better. And you see, in this business, you got to keep learning. You got to keep growing. I watch people in this type of work and they get to a level and they just kind of plateau and they get satisfied and they stop growing and they just kind of live off the level they're on and live off the land. Listen, the only way that you can be valuable to somebody tomorrow is learn something new today. When's the last time you learned something for the first time? This whole process of learning and growing and developing. But every day, add value to people. So when I was in the San Francisco airport getting ready to get on the plane this morning, the lady behind the counter, when I got me an iced tea to drink, I asked her how her day was going, and she started talking about her 3 children and how she was going to leave work as soon as she could to help them get into school. And I listened to her for a moment and smiled and told her I thought she was a good mama. Paid $1.50 for my iced tea and gave her a $20 tip. Listen to me, I want to tell you something. When leaders stop valuing people, they should stop leading people. This is not, hey, this business is a people business. It's a people business. And the caring and the loving and the valuing people is the core of longevity and success in leadership. I wish I had time to go on, but I've got to give you the other 3. Okay, the rule of 5 for lifting your lid. Every day I lead myself, right? Every day, what do I do? Secondly, add value to people. Number 3, every day I study leadership. Every day. And you say, now, John, when you say every day you study leadership, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is every day. How we doing, gang? Every day I study leadership. You see, again, back in the 70s, I heard Earl Nightingale say these words: if you will take 1 hour a day, every day, for 5 years on a certain subject, and every day for 1 hour, we'll study that subject for 5 years. In 5 years, you'll become an expert on that subject. And that was in the middle 1970s, and I said, I think I'm going to do that. I think until 1980, I'm going to spend an hour every day just studying leadership. I'm going to read leadership books, and I'm going to get around leaders. I'm going to study leadership, and by 1980, I'll be a great leader. And I did that every day until 1980. And by 1980, I thought, oh my goodness, this works so good. I think I'll do it until 1985. And so every day I did an hour of studying leadership until 1985, and I thought, oh my gosh, I know so much more in 1985 than I knew in 1980. I think I'll wait and go on to 1990. And then I went for every day till 1990. I thought, man, I'm writing leadership books and they're buying those suckers and life is good. I think I'll do this every day. What have I done? Can I tell you what I do every day? Every day. My staff, any book with the title of leadership in it, I get it. I every day read leadership. Oh my goodness, every day. And because I have so much reading to do, I took 3 speed reading courses. Oh yes. So when I interviewed Condoleezza Rice on the plane out, I read a book on Condoleezza Rice. I can read a book real fast, you understand. I took speed reading courses so I could read more. Now, speed reading didn't increase my comprehension, but speed reading lets me get to where I need to get to so I can slow down so I can understand it. You see, 20% of a book has 80% of everything you need to know. Now, there are some exceptions, my books, for example. So when I say study leadership, what do I mean? Right, real quick, okay? I got to get this done for you. That means reading. That means resources. You see, in 1973, when I realized I needed to develop a personal plan for growth and I didn't have one, and I didn't know how to develop one, Success Motivation Institute out of Waco, Texas had a kit that I could buy for $795 that would help me to personally grow, and that kit cost me 1 month of my salary. And I bought it. Well, it took me 6 months to buy it because I had to save up for it. Most of my life, I have belonged to at least 7 CD clubs on leadership. Resources. Learning lunches. Every month since 1982, I've set up a lunch from somebody. I buy the lunch, I don't even eat. I just ask questions. Somebody that's smarter, faster, better than me. And I just ask questions. I call it my learning lunch. Do it every month. Oh, if I had 20 minutes, I'd teach you what I just learned. Oh, I would just teach you what I just learned in a learning lunch I had 2 weeks ago. But I don't have time. Events. Going to events, leadership events. Margaret and I started visiting presidential libraries because I love history and I love leadership. I've now been to every presidential library in America and studied it. I just constantly immerse myself in leadership events. I've already talked to you about filing. I file every day leadership thoughts, quotes. If I pulled out my iPhone right now, I could give you 36 quotes that I've picked up in the last 2 or 3 days that I file, and I just keep them in there, and I just keep reading them. I keep working, and I just keep reading them until I've got them, until they're mine. Study leadership. I do hope I'm lighting a fire for you, because I'm telling you, your leadership lid will determine how high you're going to go in this business, and I'm going to promise you, you can't increase your leadership without studying leadership. So every day I lead myself. Every day I add value to others. Every day I study leadership. Are you with me? Yes. Number 4, every day I practice leadership. I practice leadership every day. I not only study leadership, but I practice leadership. I shared with you about my organization, Equip, the largest leadership training organization in the world. You say, John, how did you, and by the way, we did that in 16 years. How did you develop the largest leadership training organization in the world? It's very simple. When we train leaders, we go in for 2 days and we have a leadership workbook and we take them through the leadership principles. And then at the end of the 2 days, we give them 10 workbooks. And we said, we'll be back in 6 months for the next session. In the 6 months we're gone, you take 10 people and you train them what we trained you to do. And they can't come back for their second training until they validate that they've trained 10. You see, a long time ago I learned, I'm not about to train somebody how to lead that isn't going to practice leadership. You see, I'm telling you, you can waste a lot of time with people who like to have meetings. But their biggest accomplishment is lighting the fire and doing a little kumbaya. The whole idea of not only knowing how to lead, but practicing your leadership. Malcolm Gladwell, who's a wonderful friend of mine, read some great books, Tipping Point, etc. Malcolm is the first guy to say that if you want to be highly successful in doing something, you have to do it at least 10,000 times. Mm-hmm. He gives examples, the Beatles, all these groups that made it big. When people say, oh my, they just made it big, they'd just done it. Practice. When Malcolm said that, I said, I wonder how many times I've spoken. So I went back and had my people do research, and I've spoken over 12,000 times. So people say, John, you walk out on stage, you take your water, you stick a cough drop in your mouth, sit on a chair and say, my name's John, I'm your friend. You don't look nervous. It's like you're having a conversation with us. Well, I'm having a conversation with you. Absolutely, and I'm not nervous. I'm not nervous. I've done this 12,000 times. You say, oh, John, you look so natural when you do that. Of course I'm natural. I've done this 12,000 times. Oh, I wish you could have seen me in the beginning. I was nervous. I wasn't natural. Practice. Oh, yes. I was over at Jack Nicklaus's house one afternoon. We were doing some putting in his green in his backyard. And I said, Jack, I've watched you make all kind of pressure putts to win major championships. Did you feel the pressure? And he smiled and said, not really. How could you have such an important putt and not have the pressure? He said, well, you have to understand, when I had that 7-foot putt, had a little break to the right. He said, to be honest with you, I've done that putt about 10,000 times. And then he said, practice gives confidence. Thank you, Jack. The rule of 5 says you got to practice leadership. Oh, I wish I had time. Okay. I don't have time, so I'm going on. Because the last one's important. But before I give you the last one, we got to review the first 4, okay? Get your axe out, gang. Get your axe out. We got 4 things to do. You got your axe? Come on. We got a tree here, huh? We got a tree. Okay. Well, when I pick up that axe, my first swing, the first thing I do is, in my rule of 5, every day I pick up that axe, and the second thing I do every day absolutely, and I pick up that axe, and the third thing I do is every day and that's right, and I pick up that axe, and the fourth thing I do every day is, oh, you are so stinking good. Every day, number 5, I intentionally grow. Every day. Every day I intentionally grow. Oh my goodness. Every day I intentionally grow. This is huge. If you'll just hang with me, can you give me, if you'll just give me, can I have 5, if I have 5 more minutes, okay? 5 more minutes, okay, no, there are other things on the program, and I'm not wanting to disrespect anybody or the program, so if you could just, okay. So just, this is important right here. This is important because every day I intentionally grow. Are you with me? Yes. In 1977 I wrote this. It's laminated. Yeah, it's my prized possession. Because I wasn't in a growth environment. I wasn't lucky like you. I didn't belong to an organization named by Silas. I didn't belong to an organization that is an amazing organization that's breaking all kind of records. I didn't get to go on the rocket ride. I wasn't on a ride. I was on a donkey. And that ass wasn't going anywhere. My organization's theme song was, I shall not be moved. And they weren't. And all of a sudden I decided I wanted to be a success, but I didn't have peers like you to help me be successful. I didn't have leaders like you have to help me be successful. I didn't have an organization like you have to be successful. I didn't have strategy like you and training like you to be successful. I didn't have any of that. And so I'm a kid, and I said, I want to be successful. And I knew that I had to create a growth environment, and I wasn't in a growth environment. And so how do I create a growth environment when you aren't in a growth environment? The people that I was with, their idea of progress was moving backwards slowly. So I wrote this down in the late 70s. And it's still true today. Here's what I think a growth environment is. A growth environment is a place where others are ahead of me. In other words, I want to be around people that are better than me. I want to be around people that are more successful than me. I want to be around people that are faster than me. And that's exactly what you have in this organization. You got some pace setters, don't you, huh? You got some amazing pace setters. Let me just put it this way. When you're at the head of the class, you're in the wrong class. That's good, isn't it? Yeah, it is. What do you say? It's just good. My name's John. I'm your friend. A growth environment is a place where I am continually challenged. I'm continually challenged. I mean, every day I get up, I got another hill to climb. I'm not looking for the hammock. I'm looking for the hill. A growth environment is a place where my focus is forward. It's right out in front of me. It's not behind me. It's not the good old days. It's not yesterday. A growth environment is a place where the atmosphere is affirming, where the people around me, they're encouraging me. Encouragement is the oxygen of the soul. A growth environment is a place where I am out of my comfort zone. In other words, I'm telling you, I'm taking virgin territory. I'm going places where I've never been before, and I'm not one bit comfortable. I'm nervous, and I'm excited, and I'm stretching, and I'm praying, and I'm holding on, and I'm just, help me, help me, help me. Help me, Rhonda. Help me, Rhonda. Help. I'm over my head. Are you with me? And can I tell you something? You want to be over your head. You want to be over your head. You don't want to be in the wading pool of life with ankle deep water. Get over your head. And by the way, when you're over your head, it doesn't matter how deep the water is. You're over your head. A growth environment is a place where I wake up excited. Man, I know a lot of people, they don't even wake up. We're supposed to leave our footprints in the sands of time, but a lot of people, they're just leaving their butt prints. Yeah, they just got butt prints in the sands of time. They're not doing anything. You with me, huh? Hello, come on, talk to me. There are some people, they're already dead. They just haven't made it official yet. Yeah. A growth environment is a place where failure is not my enemy. It's not my enemy. Failure is my friend. Oh, yes. I write 3 books at a time. This one's not out yet, but I've written it. It comes out next year. I love the title. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
And truly that is. Today, the standout statement that we want to leave with you is this. Just wrap your mind around this. Great leaders produce great leaders. That's what influence is all about, Chris. Yeah. And that's what we're attempting to do. That's what John has taught us. And here we are, man. I'm glad to be in the studio with you.
I am glad to be back. This is just an incredible topic for us to talk about. Remember, we define leaders or leadership as influence. Mm-hmm. And so we talk about this leadership word, and we don't want you guys to think it's one or the other. It's both. And it's whether you're leading a team, leading family at home or in your community, or maybe you're just an individual contributor. This is important stuff, and we're excited to dive in. Now, before I get to you, a couple of things I was thinking about. John initially talks about the understanding. As an influencer, you got to understand people. We often teach in our organization that you've got to know how they're wired. We've all taken personality assessments. You got to understand their learned behaviors that come both from external, from our home, from previous job, but also internally, what their learned behaviors are. And then something that's very important to us is you got to know what their personal values are, not the organizational values, but you want to begin to understand people and to begin to understand their perspective. I want to encourage you to make sure that you're thinking about what that looks like in every single person, because that is a little bit different. The other thing I want to just encourage you is John talks about being genuine when you want to connect with people. So many of us aren't authentic when it comes to connecting with our team and our people and even our family at times. And we really want to encourage you to be authentic, because it is a trust accelerator. And when they trust you and they will connect with you, you'll understand them a little bit better. So that was kind of the first point. Those are some of my takeaways from there.
Well, it goes back to that whole people want you to really be authentic. That goes back to point number 1 last week, integrity.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's how John started it, Chris, and it was such a strong point that he made last week that it bears repeating today. Get that integrity.
That's good.
A huge part of your leadership,
Yeah.
of your influence.
That's right. Based off that motive, I love it.
But I think we got the right host to talk about resistance.
I'm trying to,
and I'm being funny.
well, I'm trying to not be personally attacked by just kidding.
No, it's truly, Becky, and I mean that. I'm very excited about today, but truly, in my opinion, one of your most endearing and yet effective traits as a leader is your ability to take resistance and make something positive out of it. And so Jake probably knew that and scheduled that, but I sit here and looked at this and listened to this and went, I think it's one of the things that really makes us effective is our ability to take resistance. So I'm looking forward rather to our time together today.
Me too. And I would say you and I are wired very similarly in that aspect, that a lot of times we look at those things as a challenge. And I think it's easy when problems occur or resistance happens. Maybe we're wired one of two ways. Either we look at it like an opportunity to step up and be challenged and take it on, kind of like a competitive game that you would play. And others of us use it as almost a way to handicap ourselves. We kind of use it as a hurdle or a way that we feel like it's an obstacle instead of a challenge. And so I think all of these things come back to us relearning and understanding ourselves and the appropriate ways to approach those things. I love that John categorizes those things as, the percentages of those that are resistant and those that people sit on the fence and those that just accept change and run with it. Where would you categorize yourself? I would say the majority of the time.
So it's so interesting. Recently, I think that I like change. I like things that cause me to sharpen myself. I love to see myself as being coachable, teachable, and I think the only way you can get those kind of things is through resistance. So I think I like resistance, but it's very interesting. I want to say this on the onset because I believe that the lack of resistance or the running away from resistance is probably the single greatest limiting factor to people that want better things but are not willing to embrace resistance to get them. So let me say that right there because John says, hey, expect resistance. That's his first point. Going back to your question though, Stephanie, my wife and I were talking recently about does she think I like conflict? And I think in a lot of ways that conflict and resistance are at least cousins, if not many times the same thing, the same immediate family. And she says, you know what? I think you like control. And on times that you can handle control, you embrace resistance or conflict. But on the times you start losing control, I think you don't want conflict or resistance at that point. And I thought, wow, that's incredibly insightful if Stephanie's right. I haven't given her credit yet that she's right, but I am at least thinking about it to the point I'm putting it out in podcast land, is do we, as leaders, do we accept resistance as long as we can keep control? And when resistance or conflict begins to cause us to lose control, we shut it down. And I don't have an answer on that yet for me, but I have a real intrigue to say, I believe I do like resistance or conflict. But I'm wondering if I like it within a controlled environment. And is that really resistance, right?
Not really. I mean, I think it goes back to all of us are comfortable in our strengths. And so for you and I that are comfortable with conflict or resistance, it's still in our comfort zone. And so for everyone that's not wired that same way, it definitely can cause some stress or even anxiety at times. For many years being in sales, I had a mentor actually teach me this same concept, but he used it in apples, which for anybody that loves a visual, this works really well, where people are either red, green, and this sounds harsh, or rotten apples. And I'll get to why it's not so harsh, because red apples are those that just, again, embrace change. They want to be a part of growth. They love the challenge. They're up for those things. The green apples are those that they need questions and they have a process. So if the change doesn't happen within their process, that's where you get the resistance. Or maybe they just need time to go through the process. Some of us are willing to leap before we look, and some of us have to have all the numbers work out before they do. But the rotten apples, there are those that you could be curing cancer, they don't want to know about it. And mainly it's not because they're bad people, it's just that means they're really going to have to do something about it. When they know better, they have to do better. And so sometimes your resistance to even knowing, because it's going to force you into change or progress, or it's going to cause ripple effects, it's easy to do that. But he said it's easy when you can recognize people in those categories to know how to handle it. So those that just become so resistant they can't move, it's not that you look or think less of them, you just move on and let them go through a process by themselves. You would never pick up an apple in the store that was rotting and try to love on it so much that it changes. But we do that. If you're a nurturer too, or like control, like we do, we try to change people. So I love the fact that it gives you permission to let people be and process how they want to, but not to slow down the growth or the progress at the same time, which I think is, again, easier said than done.
Yeah, yeah. I think when we build around us, I used to call people around me that I intentionally put around me contrarians. I need people that I have a strong personality. I know that's probably a surprise to you, Becky, but I'm pretty strong, opinionated, pretty driven. And I have found that when you have several of those leadership characteristics, that it gets really easy and much more easier, I guess, is the best word to use, for people around you to just kind of be agreeable. Yep, that's good. That's good. It'll work out. Let's go. But I've also found that's not how you get the best idea. And so for years, I would try to find at least one or a few contrarians to put on my team so that I would get a different perspective. My strength became a minimizer. My passion became a limiting factor when it came out as intensity. So what I was discovering, even as John was talking, is that contrarian really is meant to give that resistance or that other perspective to make a leader sharper. And what happened when I get a contrarian around me, two things I think are the biggest takeaways. One, I typically will see a better point of view, a better vision, a better idea, because somebody around me is making me see something from a different perspective. But here's the other thing that I love to get, is it makes me sharper in how I communicate my vision or my direction. Because I know that contrarian is not going to let me just get by with just convincing people with my emotion or my passion. The words, the strategy, the structure, the plan is going to have more validity, because the contrarian is going to bring that level of resistance. And that resistance makes me sharper as I prepare, as I present, and then as we pursue the plan. There is a greater degree of effectiveness because of that resistance in one's leadership or on one's leadership's team.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think when John brings it back to the point of having a clear target, it helps bring us back to that point, as far as realizing sometimes we dilute the message and people aren't able to see the gold at the end of the rainbow. Like, we haven't created that. I know you and I have these conversations too, where we create resistance for each other or pushback. And, we had a conversation the other day where you even said, well, then I'm still not clear with my vision. And I realized, you know what, it's so true. And it's not that I don't see it or we're not excited about it. It's just sometimes we all have our own thoughts. And so it's very easy to get off track, especially if you're a creator, like you like to create things. So having that vision retold over and over again is not only one of your great strengths, but I think as a leader, we have to create that as a strength, even if it doesn't come naturally.
I want to dig into that a little bit, Becky. I didn't even think about that as I was listening, but just as you brought that, I remember that conversation you're referencing. And what I love about you is 30 minutes later, we're texting each other about something unrelated, but it doesn't change our relational connectivity at all. But I remember that comment that you were you were giving me something that was a really good idea, but from my vantage point, it took us off point from the vision that I had laid out. And so we bantered about it 2 or 3 times. We even had a couple of referees, other people in the room with us or in the conversation with us. And they would give a vantage point that would help me see you a little bit more, and perhaps gave you a vantage point that you'd let me see a little bit more. And at the end, I remember as a leader, I pulled the trump card, right? There's only one card that can be pulled in a setting like this, which is, hey, there's only one of us that's a visionary. And you're off point from the vision. Well, what do you say as a leader to that when your leader pulls the trump card, right? I remember you coming back and saying, well, I don't think it is a vision adjustment. I think it's right in line with the vision. So you're pulling the trump card, Mark, but let me come back with a little bit more resistance and tell you that this is how I am seeing it. And I went, well, maybe I'm just not giving the vision clear enough. Well, here's what I want to pull out of that, Becky. The great takeaway for me from that meeting was I need to do a better job of communicating, and sometimes communicating the vision is not telling it, it's listening for it. And I went, you know what I've got to do? I've got to let Becky regurgitate back to me what she's hearing when I give a vision comment. I bet you your takeaway was probably, I got to do a better job when I'm presenting an opportunity like this of linking it to the vision that I'm hearing Mark say. You're a brilliant leader, Becky. You're competent. You've succeeded so many times in so many areas I've never succeeded. We make a brilliant team. When you come to an impasse because of conflict or resistance, everyone needs to come to the table saying, what can I learn from this to make me more effective down the road? For me, it was clarify the vision, but not by talking more, talk less, and let Becky speak back the vision. In subsequent conversations, your takeaway in that particular issue was, hey, I need to do a better job of linking my ideas, this opportunity, to the vision that I already know what Mark is wanting right here. My challenge to us as leaders when John says, explain the rationale for change, or when he says, provide a clear target, which is 3 and 4 in our notes that we're all looking at when John's teaching, is us as leaders do not need to look to eradicate resistance. We need to look for ways to make that resistance yield a stronger leadership team, a greater resolve in the leader or the leadership team, and a way for that resistance to take us faster. Because just like a sailboat, if you can set the cast, if you can set the sail to take the wind, the resistance, that's the faster the vessel's going to go. And if you and I, as co-leaders, Becky, will look for ways to take resistance and yield exactly that, strength, we're stronger because of it. Clarity, we're more clear and effective because of it, are faster. We've learned to set the resistance, to set the sail and to go faster. Then resistance actually becomes something we long for on teams rather than we try to eliminate on teams.
I agree. And I think sometimes you and I make people nervous around us because it does sound disruptive sometimes. I think for people that might not have that foundation that you and I do as far as mutual vision and mutual respect. And we just really love each other's company, but we also understand that that's how we grow. And, my husband can attest to that as well. There's been 29 years of just a few disagreements, but we always come back stronger together. And a lot of times the disagreement isn't even on the vision. It's just communicating the process. And I think that's where you can't substitute time with people. And I love, even in other lessons that John's talked about, mentoring, you can't mentor someone, one that you don't necessarily like personally, but you also can't mentor someone you don't spend time with. I mean, it requires amount of time. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with just being able to communicate not just the end goal and the vision, but the processes around it. And I've said this to you before, especially launching new initiatives. My greatest fear is that I start running and I'm running in the wrong direction. And so when we all come together, I love our lead team meetings. I love all of our events. I love all of our calls because it really helps us all just align, and we're just all so much stronger together.
Well, I want to catch this. I want to catch this. Sometimes differences in language and communication can manifest itself as
Hmm.
resistance. And I think it's really important for leadership teams. I love that statement. I think it's important for leadership teams to identify what is resistance. In fact, I remember a conversation you and I, Becky, we had, and I was giving you the positives. I was giving you the positivity sandwich. The bread is the positive. The meat is really what I want to say. Becky, you're doing such a great job. Man, you failed miserably that last time. Becky, I'm so glad you're on the team. I mean, that's an example, okay? So we put that positivity sandwich on it. And one time I was giving you the front end positivity, and you said, Mark, can we cut to the chase and just get to the things you want to really say right here? And I started laughing because I was going to get to the things I wanted to say, but I was treating you the way I would treat the person down the road. They need to hear positivity. They need to hear something that would sandwich what you're really wanting to say from a critiquing standpoint. I want to take that a step further. I'm working with one of our teammates right now that's helping me in some of my areas. I have found that you not only need to identify what is resistance as a team, what's the rules of engagement around resistance. You need to also understand when and how you want resistance in certain areas of your life, in certain areas of your leadership. I'm telling a leader currently, hey, in this area, I need you to be a little more positive on the things I did right before you give me the critique on the things I can do to get better. Here's why. I'm not as confident in that area as I am in other areas. And so I gave this universal thought, hey, in this area, give me the resistance after you tell me two or three things that you've done right, because I'm not super secure in this area. It's outside of my skill set, but I'm needing to develop it to make my leadership more well-rounded. And it was a wonderful conversation. In fact, the leader said, that's so good, thank you. Well, then I noticed he started doing it in another area to where I don't need the positivity. I'm super comfortable there. Don't give me all the positivity. Let's save some time and get to the critique, please, because I'm ready to go. And I watched this leader, who is a developing leader, go, wow. And I can only imagine they're going, is this Jackal or Hyde I'm dealing with? Which guy am I dealing with here? But really, it's important. And let me say why I even illustrated that. It's important in leadership teams that you don't allow resistance to cause conflict that is irreparable. That's not smart leadership. You need to allow resistance to be an accelerator of trust, not a distraction from congruency. And that's a leader's responsibility, because I've seen resistance that can build trust or tear trust down. What kind of leader are you going to be, podcast listener? Are you going to be you're going to have resistance. John said it. It's his first point. Expect resistance. Now that we've got that out of the way, you're going to have resistance. What you going to do with it? Are you going to let it build trust? Are you going to let it tear trust and congruency and collaboration down? The best way I know to let resistance make an environment better, build trust, is to, one, agree with what is resistance. With you, Becky, I can go, Becky, come on. With another leader on our team, if I just use that tone, they wilt. They're done. So you got to identify what the resistance is, and then you got to put rules of engagement around how we're going to make resistance build trust. That's why, and I'm going to come back and let you say something, Becky, because I can tell you want to, and I'm ready for you to. But that's why we've called this a series. We're going to spend 2 weeks. John did 6 today. We're going to do 7 more next week, because resistance is that important. It's going to happen. But is it going to be effective or detrimental to your organization? Becky?
Yeah, no, I just think it's so important what you said of understanding in our own leadership that it's a sign of our maturity or immaturity, how we adjust our communication in that resistance moment. Because I think it's very easy for us, especially when we own the vision, to decide that we're going to communicate it the way we want to communicate it. But the fact that in number 6, John lays out the positives and the negatives, you're reading, I'm literally sitting here looking at others will feel important. new ideas will surface, and all of these things sound so great. And then it gets to the bad news, the progress will be slower and decisions can be diluted. And I immediately are like, no, that's where the resistance comes in.
I don't want that.
Right?
Hey, I resist
Yes,
that.
I'm resisting that part because that's in my nature, is just to run, run, run. And sometimes when we are running too fast, we're not bringing the right people along with us. And we need those people to grab that vision. So I think what you just said, as far as understanding that we, even in our very, very secure moments, have insecure parts of our leadership, and being just as conscious of those two helps us adapt, so that we're not resistant to even the slower movement or diluting the progress, because those things just hurt my head thinking about them. Like, how do we avoid that? And there's just no way to avoid those things.
But I want to talk about how, and I want to talk about how we create ideas. So I had this kind of this word picture. Tim Elmore, a dear friend of ours, now League of Extraordinary Leaders, joining us moving forward, has all these habitudes, and I'm gonna talk to him about this habitude that I thought about, which is the artist versus the mechanic, right? So the mechanic is how I'm naturally wired, to where I want to eliminate things, I want to fix things, versus an artist, really, as we should all be thinking of leaders, works in iterations and adds to it and creates. We're really kind of building off of what we talked about last week on our podcast of growth and how do we go about doing that. So I want you to talk a little bit as a leader in regards to creating ideas. You are not one that is short for ideas. Matter of fact, you've often said to me and the leaders inside our organization, hey, let me be a thinking partner for you. And I love John's statement in here where he says the leader doesn't come up with all the ideas. The leader is catalyst for great ideas.
Yep.
How do you position yourself as a leader in order to be that catalytic leader, that moment where you're able to help leaders create a little bit? Because it has happened. I told you this is personal for me, and you've helped me grow through that. How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, well, so I love, one of the greatest feedback that we get from our podcast is how authentic, how vulnerable we all are. And of course, you work alongside John Maxwell, who's very comfortable in his own skin, and he talks about his weaknesses more than anybody else. Right. So we create this real vulnerable environment. And I want you to know, Chris, I appreciate you being vulnerable right there at the beginning in your pursuit of more creativity. I don't think you're not creative. I think you're pursuing to be more creative.
That's correct.
Now, let me relate to that. Because on John Maxwell's team, I don't feel like I'm very creative either, and you were very kind to me in your question, but you got to know I struggle with that same thing. Man, there is a level of creativity that I want. And to illustrate, let me explain something. So for 2 years now, we have changed kind of the organizational and the ownership structure of John's organization. We're 2 years in right now, 2 years in. And something I heard Jamie Kern-Lima say last week, she says a lot of leaders confuse momentum with a tailwind. Now, in creativity, I've got to be honest, since you were honest, I'm riding a tailwind. I've got a John Maxwell tailwind pushing me on the creativity. Even 2 years after some of the dynamics and changes that we've had, there's a tailwind, Chris, that you and I and our leadership are on.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
However, one of the things that I do feel like, and in 2022, it's interesting that you asked me this in January of 2022. In 2022, John is going to be working with me on opportunities. How do you sense and seize opportunities? And isn't sensing and seizing opportunities really all on the back of creativity? Yeah. And so I love you asking that question because, one, in full disclosure, I've got to be honest with you, YouTube viewers and podcast listeners, I feel a little bit like Chris at the opening here. I got some work to do. At the same time, that is the focus this year, is to be a leader that creates. So let's talk about it. I have discovered that when I'm invited into a room to where a good idea is already given, I used to think that my role was to affirm the idea. Good idea, Chris. Way to go. High five, man. Show the YouTube. We're actually in studio. I wanted y'all to see that. Good idea, Chris. High five. Way to go. And I was just this cheerleader. And I changed something about 3 years ago when I heard John say something about, hey, I don't need your affirmation for my idea. I need your contribution to a better idea.
Yeah.
And the first thing I'll tell most of us leaders is walk into rooms with an understanding I have one responsibility. I want to up-level the thinking and the energy and the ideation of the opportunity that we're discussing. I change my perspective. They don't need affirmation. They don't need confirmation. It's their idea. They probably feel better about it than they should. Okay, now that we've said that,
That's right.
now let's go. Now, I don't want to walk into the room and be a critic either.
That's right.
So I've got these leaders that come in and want to tell you why it's a bad idea. I've got other leaders that want to come in and tell you why it's the best idea they've ever heard. The leaders that I want in creative environments is the leaders that come in with one intent, to up-level your thinking. Yeah. And I think that has helped me, Chris, to perhaps get a little bit of the accolade that you gave me in the question. I have changed the perspective of my responsibility, surround myself with creative, good, ideating type people, but now my responsibility is to up-level, not affirm, and certainly not to critique.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about this example before we started recording, but it was one that I was thinking about because you have communicated to our leadership team. In proximity to John over the next year, I've got to understand how does he come up with all these ideas and the opportunities to add value to people and organizations because he does it so well.
I'm going to jump to the end and ask a question because it ties to what you just said, but then I have a question for the middle of what he was teaching on. So if you're listening, you're thrown like, that was the end of what he said. But at the very end, John talked about in order to prepare and process correctly, he needs to pull away from things. And he listed, I don't know, six things that he needed to pull away from. And at the very end, he talked about occasional high performance versus consistent high performance, and then paying the price every day. Now, if you guys are like me and you're like a type A person and you hear that, the first thing that I think of in all transparency is I think that sounds overwhelming because I'm already all systems go in so many things. So now if I can think of myself as like bringing high performance to everything I do. But let's not forget the very first thing that he said is what is good to do versus what is best. So there are a ton of good things to do that come at us every single day. And having the discipline and understanding of what is the best, it's a lot of good stuff. That's one of the biggest learning lessons for me as a leader is learning that there are a lot of good things that I have to say no to in order to do the best and to bring my high performance consistently every day, that it needs to be, just to the things that are the best things, or else I'm kind of going to waste my time. Like John will say, I do 3 things well. And I have a team around me who is great at all the things I'm not great at, but he works really hard to do those 3 things well. And so I think it's freeing and not to miss that we aren't just supposed to bring high performance to every single thing we do in the day, but really to the things where where we'll get the most return. Am I saying that clearly? I mean, I know that's a lesson John always speaks to us.
Well, I love that you brought this up because what we do is we mystify success.
Yeah.
We put a mystique to high performers. We look at John Maxwell on stage and we go, wow, that guy's incredible. I bet you it's awesome to talk to him at 4 a.m. I've talked to him at 4 a.m. And most of the time, 4 a.m. is not this great orator that is communicating this beautiful, memorable message. It is, Mark, why can't we get XYZ done? Now,
Right.
I say that because we mystify the performance. We put a mystique on the performance and don't realize that John is the same guy that says you need to be consistent in high performance. He's the same guy that teaches you can't be 100% all day, every day on
That's right.
everything.
Yes.
And so John is not speaking in paradoxes there. We take a point that should be meant to improve our consistent aspiration of high performance, and we cause it to lose credibility because we think we got to do that all day long.
Yeah.
And it overwhelms us. Tracy, I've been around you. We've traveled the world together as co-board members in John's nonprofit, and you supporting John and I through all the different things that you do. You are a high performer consistently. And so I'm glad you brought this up, because if you, knowing you like I know you, are sitting here hearing John teach that today and go, man, I'll never measure up to high, consistent performance, then certainly there are others in our podcast family that's feeling the same way. And I'm just going to challenge you. Don't try to win the championship in one day. Tracy, I'm going to take us back to the very beginning of what John said, because he said, winners value the process of winning. So hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to it and I'm going to teach for a moment. Winners value the process of winning. Value the process of becoming a consistent high performer without the burden of becoming that overnight. If you got impacted by something John said today, wake up tomorrow and be a little bit more consistent in your pursuit of high performance, rather than waking up tomorrow discouraged because you failed at X, Y, or Z.
Right.
Going back to the point of winners value the process of winning, value the process of improvement. I am an Atlanta, Georgia native. There's not many of us. I love sports. What being an Atlanta, Georgia native and loving sports means is there are 99.9 seasons of every sport in our city that I'm disappointed. 99.9%. But today, December, the last podcast of December, I can say right now that the Atlanta Braves are the world champions. Oh yeah, I know that was about 2 months ago, but forgive me, I'm still living in the glory of being world champions. But listen to this. I'm thinking, as we record this podcast, I'm thinking of the interviews with our coach and with a couple of our champion performers right after the World Series. And I don't know if any of you stayed up East Coast past midnight to hear the interviews, but I did. I missed Atlanta again because I was reveling in the moment. You know what every one of them said, Tracy? They were like, man, we were awesome tonight. Oh my, the sweetest thing about tonight is the win tonight. No, it was 6 games into the World Series. It didn't take us 7, but it took us 6. It wasn't the fact that we finished it in 6 rather than 7. You know what every one of them said? The sweetest thing about this victory is in August, we were not even a 500 winning percentage team. The Atlanta Braves of 2021 that are the world champions were the latest team to ever get to 500. In other words, just as many wins as losses in the history of the World Series. We were the latest. And what they said is, the most sweet thing about this is we couldn't even play 500 ball in August. And in 2 months, we turned it around and became world champions. You know what they were saying? We love the process more than the win tonight.
That's right.
We love the fact that we were bad, but now are good, better than we love the great experience of championship. Guys, winning is a habit. You know what the most favorite part of this subject title should be for all of us? The word habit, not the word winning. But most of us want to focus on the word winning as if it is the formula. The formula is not winning. The formula is habits that take you to winning. That's the secret sauce.
That's amazing. And they had a lot, winning the World Series. That's beautiful. And congratulations to all you Brave fans.
Thank you. I'll take it. Thank you.
But it really is, winning is not necessarily winning the end. It's all the wins along the way, the successes that you find along the way so that you enjoy the process. And so if some of you are thinking like, man, I have some bad habits. I quickly grabbed, while I was listening to John, I grabbed off my shelf this book, Today Matters, and John referenced it, but I want to encourage those of you, if you don't have it, get this book. If you do have it, go pull it off your shelf. And it's like this is what it'll look like on your bookshelf, red and white. And so for those of you who are watching us, but in the first page, before he even gets to chapter 1, he says, just for today. And he makes a list of 20 things maybe. And 20 things to do. So if you're like, I'm not really sure how to create healthy habits, I've just been one of these people who, like Tracy, tries to go 100 at everything. And then I realized I don't need to go 100 at everything. Mark talked about when we travel for transformation to these countries,
And, we are with the people and you're all giving 100%. And then you get back on the bus and you go to the next event. And on the bus, we're all very kind of, well, John is talking and teaching always, but in that moment, we're kind of quieting ourselves because we don't need to be at 100 when we're on the bus. And so there's those moments in the day where you can give yourself permission that you don't need to bring 100, except for those moments where it really is going to bring the biggest return. So if you're looking for a launch pad for that, or to try to wrap your head around those habits that Mark talked about, open up Today Matters and look at Just for Today, the list that he put there, which I think is so powerful. There's this quote, Albert Einstein says, try not to become a man or woman of success, rather become a man or woman of value. And that's not at the day where you win the World Series. That's every time. Are you a person of value? Every time you show up where it's going to bring the biggest return, which he then goes on. It kind of leads me to the next one. Are you okay if I ask another question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So he talked about when he decided whether he was going to be a wing it speaker. And this, sorry if that was on my microphone, pierced my heart because I know that there were times as a young speaker that I winged it. I called it in because I knew I had charisma. I knew my topic. I could teach it like that. If somebody said, hey, Tracy, can you stand up here and talk on this? I knew that I could do that. But there came a time where the first time I ever heard John say this, it was very convicting to me because I think I was relying on my natural gifts rather than developing my gifts. So I want to ask our podcast audience, number one, what are you winging that you need to put a little bit more preparation into to knock it out of the park, to really honor the moment where you get to influence other people? What are you winging that you need to put more time into and take away time from something that's less of value, but really where your sweet spot is that you need to not wing, but really prepare for, so you just kill it? And then my second question is for you, Mark, and I'm just curious, what are you tempted to wing in the day? And how do you keep yourself from relying on your natural gifts and talents? Because you have many.
Yeah, thank you for that. I love this question. I love how you highlighted it, and I love how you challenged our podcast listeners to identify where they're winging it. I want to say one thing on it before I answer the question, and that is, most of the time we wing where we are naturally gifted. In other words, John is one of the greatest connectors I've ever met. Now, what I really mean by that, he's one of the greatest communicators I've ever heard. But he doesn't see communicating as getting a message across. He sees communicating as connecting with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I call him the greatest connector I've ever met. He connects with people from stage better than I've ever met. What John was saying is, years ago, he could have winged it because he's so good at it. Yet he decided he wanted to be excellent with it.
Right.
So most of us struggle with the winging it syndrome on the things that we really have the opportunity to be unforgettable with. See, you won't be unforgettable by just being good. You will be unforgettable when you are better than anybody else. John's good because he decided he wasn't going to settle with being great at a natural gifting. He decided he was going to go to the next level of greatness by being unforgettable.
Mm-hmm.
Back to your question, which is probably true for most of us podcast listeners. I wing it with relationships. I'm a relational person. I'm naturally gifted to be relational. But I have found that if I rely on relationships, the higher the level and competence of relationships around me, the least effective I am, because I was not intentional with that. And so I'm convicted with your question to go most often, whether it's a leadership moment with my team, whether it's a moment to communicate with a president or prime minister of a country, I don't always spend a lot of prep time on relationally connecting with people, doing a little biographical research, finding out what they like, what they don't like, because I don't need all that information to connect with people. Yet if I spent time to get to know their interests coupled with my natural gifting, I would be unforgettable. But I'm not unforgettable sometimes relationally just because I'm good. I'm only unforgettable when I take good and make it exceptional and unforgettable. The way a relational person, i.e. me, becomes unforgettable is when I bring my natural talents with my preparation and I create unforgettable moments. And I'm not doing that extremely well before you ask me that very pointed question in front of tens of thousands of people, Tracy. So thank you very much for the conviction.
I mean, think about if every leader that's listening to this podcast or watching it would do what John challenges to do right now. Mic drop, podcast over, go to work. And it's these three questions. How much time do I spend weekly equipping others? And Chris, while John was teaching, I went back in the Rolodex in my mind. That's an old word for you young people that means a big old Rolodex thing on your desk of just memories or contacts was what it was most of the time. But I went through and shuffled through my mind really quick, and I went, last week, how much time did I spend equipping? Oh, it was that silent in my mind. I don't think I spent any time last week equipping. In the season that we're in, foul, throw the penalty, 15 yards back. I'm going to look today at my calendar and say, how much time am I spending equipping? And then the other question is how many people are we equipping? I've got in my mindset now, I've got one or two people that I need to be equipping so that I can get some things off my plate rather than who can I equip to help me reach for the future. I'm trying to equip a select few to help me with my present challenges. And as CEO, if I don't keep equipping people for our future rather than equipping people to get my current schedule in check, I'm going to lose the ability to grow bigger. That was convicting to me, dude. And then finally, this third question, how many people are we equipping, goes back to that same thing. Man, I'm just equipping just a couple right now, and I am paralyzing or stymieing our growth for the future the smaller my pool of equipping is.
That's good. I appreciate the transparency. I'm going to jump in this boat with you because as I listen to John and even now just our conversation, I feel convicted as a leader inside the organization when I look at those questions. And so no doubt one of the takeaways for you, whether you're watching us today on YouTube or you're listening to us, is to really get alone and answer those questions transparently. Then maybe even ask some of your top key leaders to answer them on your behalf and see where there is a gap for that. Here's where I was thinking when you were just talking about that. I read an article some time ago where Harvard Business Review said 85% of the time of most successful leaders, they interviewed and studied 200 leaders across the board. I don't know the filter of what they decided, but 85% of their time was focused on the EQ side of leadership, the emotional intelligence and connection with their people. 85% of the time. Wow. You and I are sitting here saying we're convicted because we don't even know if one day we spent. Now, did we do some emotional intelligence connections? We did, but did we get specific about the equipping side? I don't know that we have. And so I would challenge each and every listener and viewer to really have a conversation with yourself about that, because that's how we do multiply the impact of what you want to do. Now,
and let me go to that. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Jake, just pause the clock because we got so much to talk about. But right before you were a part of this same conversation, Jared Cagle's in the studio with us. He helps me with content. He helps us all with content. Right now, he's helping John with this new book, drum roll. You can't wait for it. It's going to be The Laws of Communication. Can't wait to open that up. And he was talking about John jumping on a plane. We've both got an international trip that we're preparing for currently at the time of recording. And John taking time to make sure that he spends time equipping somebody that is going to give him back some things that he needs on this trip. I was recently on a trip with John and Jared where John was laying out with Jared, these are the things that I need. This is what will help me. And then he's following up and saying, hey, as Jared said in studio a while ago, 10 o'clock a.m., 10 o'clock a.m. I'll tell you, it wasn't news to Jared. 10 o'clock may have been news to Jared, but that the timeline was coming wasn't, because a month ago we were on a plane and I heard John preparing Jared for that. You never get too established, back to me and you playing the conviction card. You never get too successful in life that you don't have to be intentional in equipping. This weekend's expectation of Jake, have it to me by 10, began a month ago on a plane of equipping because there was intentionality around equipping. So you made a point there that, yeah, equipping is important, but intentionality around that equipping is the thing that's going to make it feel less like delegation and unrealistic expectation, because intentionality and due diligence was done in the equipping process.
That's good. And not only intentionality, but in that story you're just talking about, the why behind 10 o'clock is coming, right? Because then if you explain the why to the team members and you bring them along in that process, it doesn't feel like a project, a timeline, a delegation. They feel part of it. So I love that.
Chris, can I give, everyone always comments when I talk about my fumbles and failures. Thanks, Mark, for being so authentic. Thanks. I'm gonna give one. You and I have not scripted this. We very rarely script anything for these podcasts because we want it just to be leadership lived out. And so we've not scripted this, but we're in the middle of a really significant project. We call it Project Sawdust because it's creating a lot of sawdust as we build our future. And so in this project, which involves a lot of rebranding, look and feel of how we want to be perceived, our value proposition. I mean, it's been almost a year-long process, and almost every meeting that I'm in, I make statements last because I want to aggregate and keep content, and I want to keep information flowing. And a lot of times senior leaders don't realize that once they weigh in on a situation, they take the air out of the room. And leaders, you got to understand that there is a weight that your words carry that can suffocate a room. And we like that because it feels powerful, it feels directive, it feels unifying because we've got the vision and the direction. But let me caution you that you can kill creativity before creativity is ever birthed with that weightiness of you weighing in. And so I've really worked hard at that. I'm listening. Well, we came to one component of the process that we just decided to make the decision with just a smaller group than the normal expanded group. And so when it came time to present that to the bigger group, guess what I did? I stepped up, I gave direction, I gave why I liked it, and I set the course. Mm-hmm. And our partners commented afterwards, went, wow, Mark, that was such a lesson in leadership. You listen all the time. For you to have jumped in first was so powerful. Thank you. We loved watching that. And so I kind of took the pat on the back and said, yeah, now that. Guess what? Just for the fumble failures and all that stuff. That's the one thing so far that we're coming back and readdressing right now because I didn't get buy-in from the entire group. And I just think that's hysterical because it was the right leadership thing to do. But you know what else is the right leadership thing to do? To humbly realize we may need to alter the course if we can't get our champions, our vision carriers, to get excited about this vision. And I don't feel embarrassed about that. I know I did the right leadership thing because we would have never made a decision if I hadn't weighed in first. What I do know, however, is an even better leadership posture is once you make a leadership decision, listeners, and don't miss this, once you make a leadership decision, remain in a posture of listening. We make decisions as leaders and we move on so fast that we don't listen after the decision to an important question that John Maxwell asked me every single week for the last 11 years. Here it is. Don't miss it. Mic drop moment for the podcast. What am I missing?
Yeah.
John will ask questions until he gets enough information to issue direction, to give a directive. But he never stops listening because after he gives the directive, he'll look at me so often and go, now that I've given the directive, what am I missing?
Love that.
And I'm in a what am I missing mode, Chris, about something that you happen to be on a different side of the table with me on this particular issue. And I'm in a what am I missing mode. And Chris, good news for you. You're going to see some additional mock-ups soon to this particular project because I'm still, as a leader, issuing a directive. I'm still in a listening mode of valuing questions.
Welcome to the Maxwell Leadership Executive Podcast. where our goal is to help you increase your reputation as a leader, increase your ability to influence others, and increase your ability to fully engage your team to deliver remarkable results.